Good morning, I'm WaywornWyrm and welcome to my channel, and welcome to episode 7 of The Stolen Land, Warfare in Miniature. Working their way steadily down the corkscrewing cavern, the expedition can only hear near constant screams of some high-pitched creature. Eventually, they reached the bottom, where they saw an egg-shaped cavern covered in rocks, with an opening into a chasm on the far side. A bit closer to hand, against one of the side walls, they saw 6 mites gathered around one of 4 kobolds tied to the roots that make up the walls. The other 3 kobolds are hanging limp. Apparently, the screams are coming from the kobold that is being surrounded. This time, Petra is the first to rush into the fray. Something about the captured prisoner sets her off in a rage. One of her hand axes split one of the ugly, blue, pimply creatures, but the second axe is met with resistance as the mites howl with rage and draw their daggers. Tiber joins Petra against the 5 remaining mites and quickly makes 4 remaining mites. Lucian is the last to join the melee, and it appears he's finally adjusted to the low ceiling as he cuts down a mite. The 3 remaining mites attempt to run, however, Lucian cleaves one in twain while Petra dispatches another. Unfortunately, Tiber misses with his strike against the retreating mite. Umbria dispatched the last of the mites as it was reaching the edge of the chasm, her ray of frost striking the mite in the back and sending it into the chasm out of control. Petra quickly cuts the ropes holding the living kobold up, and he sinks to his knees. "Thank you! Thank you!" he chirps at them. "Please help me. I've come here to rescue my tribe's holy statue from these nasty mites. The soot scales will give you many treasures if we return with the statue. Shaman Tartuk, the leader of my tribe, will reward you greatly." The group looked at each other for a minute, silently considering in front of their freed prisoner. Finally, Lucian turned to the kobold. "Yes, I think we can do that." "Oh, thank you. With the return of the statue, we'll be able to break the curse and free my people." Petra turned to the kobold. "What is your name?" "I am Mikmek." Umbria walked forward to Mikmek. "Nice to meet you, Mikmek. I'm Umbria, and would like you to have this." She took out her dagger and handed it to the kobold, who squealed in delight and readied it. Lucian looked at Mikmek. "I need you to stay in the back. We need to find your people after we've cleared out this tree, and we need to talk to them. We can't do either of those if you're dead." Mikmek looked sad at the news, but he nodded. "Sure, I'll stay in the back." Crossing the room, the party comes to a deep, ominous chasm that splits the passage. The chasm is a few yards wide, about twice as deep, with thick ropes of tangled roots filling the entirety of it. The passage continues on the other side of the chasm, and between the 2 ledges are numerous loops that have been tied into the roots to serve as hand and footholds. Lucian calls for the party to stop at the edge of the chasm. "No, this is too easy. Clearly, it's a trap. We have to figure out what the trap is." He stopped and studied the area for about a minute or so before continuing. "I do believe that some of these loops are rigged to tear loose if any pressure is put on them." He spends another minute or so pointing out each of the loops designed to fail to the other members of his expedition before continuing. "But with how relatively shallow the chasm is, and how choked with roots it is, there must be something in the chasm. So keep up your guard. And Mikmek," he turned to the kobold, "don't start crossing until we're sure nothing is in there." Lucian started easily working his way down the near side of the chasm. Petra followed, also having no difficulty. As Lucian was starting up the other side, Petra was at the bottom of the chasm, and Tiber was working his way down gingerly. A hissing noise comes from down the cavern, and soon they see a large centipede, at least 20 feet long, slithering through the roots toward them, with two long whip-like tendrils thrashing at its back end. Lucian started moving surprisingly quickly through the roots, finally able to have the room above him he had been missing the entire time in his mite hive, and he sliced deeply into the centipede. Tiber, not wanting to be outdone, also started moving toward the centipede using the roots and slashed deep into it. The centipede was quite injured and was very confused about the difference between what it had anticipated and what was happening. As Petra ran toward the centipede on the bottom of the chasm, she couldn't find a way up to attack its underside, and stood there trying to figure out the best way up. Umbria shot a ray of frost at it, and temporarily froze part of its carapace. Mikmek, with a running jump and a battle yell, as befits only a small kobold, jumped down into the chasm on the centipede's back, started repeatedly stabbing it in the back of the head until it stopped moving. Lucian angrily glared at Mikmek for a second before he finished climbing into the passage on the far side of the chasm. Soon after, the rest of the expedition joined him. They slowly moved forward and eventually entered the next room. Rows of wooden pegs lined the earthen walls, some hung with tiny, filthy cloaks. In the center of the room stood a rickety table held together with twine, covered with a filthy gingham tablecloth, and heaped with mounds of dirt and twigs and gravel, apparently arranged to form some sort of a map. Sitting at the edge of the map, weighing down a scrap of paper, is a blood-stained ivory statuette of what looks like a crouching reptilian devil. A bulging burlap sack sits under the table. There are 5 mites standing around the table. One of them is clearly the leader and is fighting with the others over something in its language, whistling with almost every word. Nearby lays a giant tick the size of a bugbear. The expedition enters the room and stops, shocked at what they see. Primarily the giant tick. The advisors see the humans and yell, their leader spinning around in an extremely ugly face, even for a mite, with a rash of pimples across his face and tongue, and a large gap between his teeth is exposed. He runs over to the giant tick and jumps on its back, and orders, apparently, a charge. The mite rushes over to Lucian and sinks his teeth into him, and starts trying to suck out his blood. The mites are the next to react, and they swarm Lucian and Tiber. The 2 mites attacking Lucian are unable to get to him, well as he struggles with a giant tick. However, one of the 2 on Tiber is able to stick him with a dagger. Petra runs forward and lops off the head of the mite on the tick's back with one swing of her hand axe, and kills a second one on the ground with the other axe. Tiber reaches over to Lucian and casts a spell to heal some of his wounds. And all of Lucian's wounds close back up, and he's ready to continue the fight. He then pushes the tick off himself and shoves his sword into it, not killing it, but causing it to rear back and throw the dead mite from its back. Umbria shoots a ray of frost at one of the remaining mites and strikes it dead. The tick settles back on the ground and goes to attack Lucian again. Lucian is unable to dodge out of the way as it sticks him a second time. The 2 remaining mites start running for their lives. Petra pulls out her bow and fires at one, hitting it in the center of its back, taking it down. Tiber casts the healing spell a second time, bringing Lucian back from the brink a second time. Once again, Lucian pushes the tick off of himself and slashes with his sword. Again, he hits hard, but again, it's not enough to take down the tick. Umbria shoots a ray of frost at the last remaining mite and takes it down. The tick tries a third time to latch onto Lucian, but this time it's unable to as Lucian pushes back with his shield. Petra jumps up on the back of the tick and starts hacking at it with her hand axes until it collapses and doesn't get back up. As the fight dies down, Mikmek runs into the room and picks up the statuette. He grins and yells, "Death to Tartuk!" in triumph for a second before his eyes go wide and he clasps his hand over his snout. Lucian rounds on Mikmek. "What?" "Nothing," stammered the kobold. "Mikmek, what aren't you telling us?" "Fine. No one likes Tartuk, and everyone, including Chief Sootscale, is afraid of him, and they don't want to be cursed. But as long as Tartuk has control of the statue, no one dares to move against him. Maybe we can return the statue to Chief Sootscale." And that is something to think about for sure. Looking at the paper under the statue, Lucian holds it out to Mikmek. "Can you read this?" Mikmek frowns and looks it over for a few seconds, and then grins with pride. "It's a list. On one side, it says us, and lists kobold statue and lots of spears and coins. On the other, it says them, and lists magic dust, lots of coins, and shiny human ring." Lucian's eyes light up at that. "That's good. We must go see your chief immediately." While this was happening, Petra had gone over to the sack under the table and sorted through it. "There aren't many things here. Quite a few coins, I'll let you have, boss, and several spears, but that's it." Mikmek ran over and grabbed one of the spears. "I'll take that." The expedition quickly moves out of that room and finds an empty room that contains a haphazard collection of living arrangements, and in one corner sat 2 musical instruments. Reaching the far end of the room, they realized that this was the room they had stopped at before. "They must have left when we killed their leader," Tiber noted. They continued to move quickly through the already cleared hive and left out the hole into the midday air. And thank you so much for listening to episode 7 of The Stolen Land. Tune in on March 3rd for episode 8, The Soot Scales. And make sure you tune in tomorrow to episode 2 of Curse the Darkness.